Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Watching Privacy Show, number 18 on November 5th. We got Brent and Raji with us. We got new name cards here. We got red instead of the gray, so we've made some upgrades. Let's see. How are y'all doing? Can y'all hear me?
All good.
Cool. All right. So let's dive right into this week in privacy. So first up, I think probably maybe the bigger news, but Facebook, our friends, are basically shutting down or stopping the use of some facial recognition, essentially. And this was quite the interesting wording that they came up with. Some of the text that we have on the next slide here is basically from their own press release that talks about the reason they're kind of stopping it is because there isn't enough regulation in place and things along those lines that it makes it seem like they're doing something good. Obviously, the PR department spun it pretty well. Um, However, not exactly the case here because just last year, 2020, they got fined something like 500 million, some odd for what do you call it, some facial recognition issue? I think in Illinois or something along those lines. And a part of that settlement is basically was making some changes to their privacy um, approaches, especially regarding facial recognition. And I guess the key thing to note is, I mean, on the surface, it sounds very good. They're deleting over a billion pictures that they used in their facial recognition system and makes it sound like it's like a step forward, but it also worded like they're begrudgingly doing it because of a lack of regulation and because of societal pressures. Um, and at the end of the day, from a technical perspective, their facial recognition system has been trained already. It's already got the billion data points in there. So it works, and it works obviously very well. So stopping the automatic tagging or quote deletion of past records, that doesn't really change anything because the model's been trained. And you don't need the old stuff to keep training it because it's already been trained on the old stuff, and deleting it has no impact going forward. So what did you guys kind of take of this? It seemed kind of just odd in general, I guess, from multiple accounts, but happy to hear your takes.
Do you trust?
Absolutely not. I'm not sure anybody does.
You know, I think a couple of things that stand out for me. One, there's more to this story than what you see in their post. Something happened behind the scenes that will likely leak in the in coming weeks and months. But we just have to make sure that there is a we listen to this and there's not a lot of we don't take it at face value is my point. So we'll have to see how it goes.
Uh, I was on mute the whole time. I was like, "What? Nobody's listening to me." No. So 500 million. It sounds like a lot. It's $500 million, but Facebook recently announced their quarterly earnings, and I believe they made close to 29-30 billion in the quarter, and about 10 billion was profit. So 500 million to them is kind of like a slap on the wrist. It's not anything that's going to deter them, I don't think. And so yeah, it feels like we're always playing a shell game. Things are done more for show than for actual effect. And it just feels like this is another example of
Yeah, I think the article that I was reading about their previous fine, they like had a quote from I think the CTO or some C-level executive there, and he basically his quote was along the lines of, um, our administrative costs have gone up because of regulations because they just consider these things like cost of doing business and like built into it, not like any sense of like remorse or like let's try to do better or figure things out. And then one other thing I kind of noticed also was Facebook is technically stopping using it, but maybe that doesn't mean it doesn't go into the metaverse and how other apps in the Facebook ecosystem is working it. It was very like carefully worded. And if we know anything about these PR things is a lot of it is just basically massaging words around to make spin the narrative as you want it to. And so with the lack of trust, you don't really believe anything they say, so it doesn't help their situation. Um, but yeah, so I mean, not very good. But I didn't really see too many like counter arguments or counter articles on it in general, and I'm not quite sure why. It just seemed like it kind of got brushed under the radar a little bit, but maybe more will come. Maybe even reporters couldn't figure out what they were saying from from their PR speak. But we can switch gears and go to the next one down under, and we've got our Australians. Um, Kind of an interesting, I would say, catch 22 here because Clearview AI, which I think we mentioned last week and the week before, and for sure we're going to do a deep dive on these guys because the more and more I read, it's just like the crazier and crazier these guys are. But they breached Australians' privacy. There was some law, I think, in the 80s or 90s, I think, 1988 actually, collecting information without consent, things along those lines, and they breached it. And I mean, part of it is irony because we've talked before about Australian privacy laws in general and how the government's been kind of violating a lot of privacy and rights and things along those lines. But now they're at least holding the company accountable. So I think Clearview had to delete a bunch of data again in Australia. But I don't know. It seems kind of tough because I mean, again, it's a slap on the wrist. It's not saying that they can't work together. And ultimately, I I mean, I guess I didn't dig deep enough into this one, but I'm not sure if there's any like police departments or governmental organizations in Australia that are Clearview customers, because Clearview primarily deals with like local law enforcement and FBI and things along those lines. And so if they have customers in Australia, that's one thing. But if they don't, then that means like American companies are getting information on Australians, which is obviously a bad look. But did any of you guys kind of read anything else about this or have any thoughts or just kind of par for the course?
Uh, I'm just looking at the the what they kind of breached in this Privacy Act of 1988 to collecting sensitive information without consent. I mean,
Hmm.
you almost don't even need to go past that, but they did. Collecting personal information by unfair. All right, so let's kind of not supposed to be collecting certain things, using unfair means to collect the things that they shouldn't be collecting, not taking reasonable steps to notify. I mean, this is like I thought you only got three strikes. It seems like there are unlimited strikes for this, and it's funny, like you said, we've been, I think, at least over the last several or two, three, 4 episodes, this Clearview company seems to be coming up a lot. And it may be just that, like you were saying, we may be just touching, kind of the tip of the iceberg with what's going on. And this is just one company. Um, we who knows how much we're going to find out how what was going on. It's like the wild, wild west, or the gold rush of 1846 or 49 or something. All by any means necessary, people are rushing to get this data and this gold. And in this instance, gold is our personal consumer data. And I
Hmm.
think we're gonna find out just how far people were going to collect this stuff. I don't think we're near understanding just the depths that companies sank to get this stuff.
Roger, do you
Yeah,
have better
clear.
audio now? Ugh.
Let's see now. Okay.
Unfortunately, yeah, it's not agreeing with tech here.
Oh well. Let's see. I mean, if anything, I would say this kind of a law in '88, I would say is a pretty good thing. So I mean, it seemed like
Yeah,
those are better
we
protections than we got over here. So I'm not, it's not all bad.
think about it, but think about that was 1988, 32, 33 years ago, and they were already thinking about it. Now, I'm sure they weren't thinking about this from a digital perspective, but just that they were thinking about it, and even though they weren't thinking about it digitally, it should be carried through
Yeah.
because it's even easier to do this stuff that they cited in 33 years ago. It's even easier to do this stuff now. And so on the one side, it's actually kind of reassuring that at least Australia was thinking about this stuff. But look at, companies like Clearview didn't seem to care, and they skirted it every which way they could.
Yeah, I can't wait to spend a couple hours and read on these guys because I have a feeling we'll find quite the treasure trove of interesting information on them. Another, I guess, kind of segue based on this facial recognition and kind of just collection of information. This one was just weird because there's a company that basically is called Compass Group, retail technology company, have agreed to pay $6.8 million to resolve proposed class action alleging they collected fingerprint data from vending machine users without proper notice and consent. I mean, what are these vending machines? I've used vending machines, I guess, every now and again, and I guess I've never seen one fancy enough to have any kind of biometric scanning on it. But just why and how? And vending machines are like nasty in the first place. They're not even like clean things. You don't even really want to touch them in the first place. And so, like, what is going on with these guys? But yeah, like, who knew that like the what do you call vending machines were collecting
Yeah.
this information? Clearly, nobody, because they weren't disclosing it to their customers. But I mean, I
Think
don't know,
about
Brent.
what they well, think about what they did. So almost going back to what we just talked about, collecting sensitive information without consent,
Yeah.
collecting personal information by unfair means. All right, so let's just do that on these vending machines. And you're right, I don't like using those things, but I have used them in the past. So think about all the things we've talked about lately. All right, we just talked about the unfair means and collecting information, but they're doing that. You put your finger on a vending machine, they got your fingerprint, and now all the things that we talked about how you can go to a data broker and start connecting the dots.
Hmm.
So I'm sure that they took that fingernail or that fingerprint and went to the data brokers and found all sorts of data that, and then we're able to connect the fingerprint to who we are. And now they've got all of our information just from a fingerprint that they shouldn't have been collecting for the first place. And is it right that it was, the vending machine didn't do it, but somehow some other company, or they work with another company that, and that's how they got the fingerprint. I'm a little confused about how treacherous these means are, and who's all involved in this. But it just goes to show you that one piece of information that you could have given, where you thought it was anonymous, you just walked up to a machine and trying
Hmm.
to get a Coke out, and just that act can unlock who you are and all sorts of data about you to people you have no clue as to who they are.
Just seems, I guess, wildly unnecessary at a baseline. I, I, I don't know.
And
I was confused even reading the article. I was like, vending machine biometrics. What is going on here? Like, most of the time it's like cash, which was like annoying for a while. And then finally we got credit cards and vending machines, and that was good. But then who's really sticking their finger in there, and like for what reason? And
ugh,
like the person that started the class action, it was like a person at a call center that worked there, or something along those lines. Yeah, it says in mid 2019, what do you call a former employee of a call center scanned her fingerprint on a Compass vending machine, sued the company in state court. So it's like, when I was thinking at first maybe it's like some kind of like medical thing, or like, in a secure environment you might have a vending machine of certain like items, then it needs to be tracked properly. I get that, but this is a call center vending machine. Like, what are we doing here?
so the company can contracted with this vending machine company to bring those things in for their employees.
Hmm.
So I'm guessing that the company did not know the vending machine was going to be doing that kind of thing. But it's just crazy. It's like you're already getting paid to put your vending machine in there. Now you're going the extra mile to try to capture data. I mean, it's almost endless.
Yeah, I mean, see, even like the last story and this one, people are getting in trouble for not disclosing what they're doing, and I'm not really sure that's the answer, because like, yeah, we want disclosure, but I think we know what disclosure looks like. It's a check this box for terms and conditions, and like no one's reading like 50 pages of things, so it's not like, think about it. They probably have those terms and conditions, and even then they were being shady on top of the hard to understand terms and conditions. So that doesn't help their situation whatsoever. But there's got to be like a more, I would say, layman's way of explaining these kinds of things to make sure people are aware, right?
Yeah, I can think of one. Little video as you approach the vending machine. Hey, before you put your finger on this, just know that we are going to be getting your fingerprint, and we'll be finding all sorts of ways to connect that fingerprint to who you really are. Actually, you're an employee of this company, we probably already know who you are. So it's unbelievable.
Yeah. I honestly, speaking of unbelievable, I think the next story I didn't really say I could see coming. Kind of a curveball all around. So Zoom is testing ads for free accounts, and so they'll have like a
Mm,
banner image inside the stuff, and it's just like, what are you doing? Like you had a killer year, obviously in 2020.
mm,
Things are going relatively good for you as a company, and you're going to introduce ads to try to milk these free accounts. And it seems kind of just like, I mean, Roger mentioned it a couple times in previous episodes, but once a company goes
yep.
down this ads path, what kind of telemetric data about users are you tracking to serve up those ads? Because there's no way those ads are just going to be like statically placed, right? It's going to be based on where you are, how many meetings you've attended, what type of meetings, what companies and meetings have you attended, and who do you normally interact with, and what are their interests. And like, I mean, I'm not even in ads, and I could tell you a million different ways that I could target somebody simply based on their Zoom patterns, right?
Oh my goodness.
If
Yeah.
they're on mobile or not or whatever. And so, like, why? Like, I mean, I'm pretty. Well, I have a good feeling why, because the stock was killing it in 2020, and it's not killing it
Right.
in 2021, and we got to find another way to diversify. And I mean, it's not like Zoom's cheap either. And at the end of the day, I think video conferencing, part of it's getting commoditized a little bit too. I mean, every what do you call communication platform has some level of video conferencing involved in it now, right? I mean, between Teams and Google and what do you call it, Discord and whatever. There's like
Oh
many
man.
other options, right? I don't like Zoom had that head start, but it's not adding ads is not going to be the moat that you think it is, right? Create products that create value and charge more for like add-ons or whatever, and that's how you can make more money. But yeah, I think this is a very slippery slope that is going to get worse before it gets better by any means. Let's see if we got Raju back finally with clear audio. Mic check.
Yep.
Can you hear me a little
Absolutely
Mm.
better?
not.
Yeah, it's
You're off
still
the hook today.
something going on. Yeah. And this was perfectly teed up for you because just what Tay just said. How many times have we heard Raju say, when you go into the ad business, then you
Yeah.
become an ad business. So it's not like you dip your toe, your foot, your ankle, your kneecap, it all goes in after you start. You cross that line. And is there any reason to believe Zoom will not be like that? I mean, and think of the kind of information that could be captured with a Zoom ad business. I mean, there's so many things going on, so many people involved, so many conversations. Yeah,
And any private
I mean,
conversations. Imagine like families
yeah, I
talking to
mean,
each other and stuff like that over Zoom and things along those lines. And now, like, buried in some terms and conditions will be like, maybe content will be monitored or whatever like that, right? I mean, Zoom was like, didn't get nearly enough backlash for their blatant lies about end-to-end encryption for calls, and that was exposed in I think like 2019, 2020, and they basically just like created their own definition of what end-to-end encryption is, which is just like nonsense all around. And so I think finally it's coming around, but I don't think end-to-end encryption, if I remember correctly, applies to free accounts. It only applies to paid corporate accounts or whatever like that. And so yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that they do it, obviously, but it's a easy way to see that maybe for the free account, if you want to go from 40 minutes to 60 minutes for a free Zoom meeting, opt in for whatever data collection to enhance our services and offerings and whatever shady language you kind of use, and bada bing, bada boom. You're like, now your video is going to be tracked. What's in your background? What are you around? What are you wearing? All that stuff can get looked at, and I mean,
mm.
if you're on Zooms, Brent, they're going to have a field day with Rams gear. Fanatics is going to be like, we found our number one customer,
We found our
and
target.
yeah, and just looking at like the gear, what's in the background, the kind of audio, it'll know like your mic source, it'll know your camera source, it'll know everything about you. Like a lot of information in a video call that I think
Yeah.
goes underappreciated.
I just think about what you said about family doing Zoom. Think about the pandemic and how integral Zoom was to families being able to stay connected and stay in tune with what was going on. And that has
Hmm.
absolutely nothing to do with the business stuff. I mean, and the business stuff won't even be affected because we're paid for it.
Yeah.
But folks who are using this for free as a way to stay connected, you know, I the only thing I can say is you've already given that to people. It's kind of hard to take that away. So maybe they should do something like, like you said, if they want you only get a certain amount of time currently if you're a free user. I think it's like 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
But maybe if you want more time, if you want an hour, or you want a monthly hour count of certain, maybe then you say, all right, we'll do ads for that. But it just feels a little bit wrong to do it, and now all of a sudden add this component after people have already gotten used to doing these things. I don't know. And, like you said, maybe this is all being driven because of certain financial realities. But we'll see. I think they're going to get some pushback on this one.
Roger, we want to try again? I don't think so. It's not his day.
Here he is.
Isn't he muted?
I think you might be muted.
On the positive side, his bike isn't crackling if he's muted, so solve that problem.
Yeah, but now we're not hearing anything. So may have been a little bit too severe solution.
I think if anything, Zoom lucked out because I feel like Roger would have had some choice
Oh, I
words
know.
on this approach.
Can you hear me or no?
Oh,
We got you
yes.
loud and clear. There we go.
Yes.
Okay.
Let her
okay,
rip.
Perfect. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah, regarding the Zoom, obviously I mentioned in the past that privacy and ads don't mix. There is that aspect to it, but it's important to ask the question: why are they even doing this? Right? I don't think they have an option because part of it, I believe, has to do with the communication platforms being commoditized. They just touched on that, right? If you look at historically, communication applications and the platforms wants to be free. It's tough to commoditize or tough to keep that going over a period of time because they tend to get commoditized. Take something like instant messaging. How many instant messaging platforms made money? Go all the way to AOL, right? AIM and
Mm.
Yahoo Messenger, MSN Messenger to, there are some web apps like Meebus to, Skype to whatnot. Independently, they did not find a business model that was independent. Now, video conferencing, and thanks to COVID, it became a commodity. In the long run, it is going to be commoditized. So video conferencing is the new instant messaging. You got to have it, and people are not willing to pay. And the competition is so broad, and or at least in Microsoft or Google or any of the other vendors out there, they're going to be offering it for free, and several vendors out there will be offering it for free or close to being free. So which means if you're the vendor that is charging, well, the road, it may not last long. So they have to find an alternative business model. My guess is that's the reason they're trying to experiment with this thing where that's not to say that it's the right model, but that is probably the thinking that is going into it because, you know, expect Microsoft and Google and Facebook and several other vendors, Amazon, to offer video and audio conferencing for free, just like they offer instant messaging for free. That is the reason Slack had to sell because independently it may not, it did not make sense. They cannot last for, let's say, a decade or so. Zoom, as a strategy wise, may not have that runway. So that's the reason they're looking at alternative ways to monetize it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I guess especially after the deal for them acquiring 5 9 fell through,
Hmm.
they're still, that's all they are. That's all they do. And I guess either they have to acquire something that's different that allows them to, charge, something above, the commodity pricing, or, do this thing and this ad thing. I'm just curious to see if, uh, how they roll it out, and if they are going to give people an option, or if they're just going to say, look, we got to do this, and we're going to do it, and let the chips fall where they may. There are other options for people, and it'll be interesting to see if the ads actually do work the way they do think they will, or will it drive these other people that weren't paying anything to another option. Because you're right, I think standalone video companies or video streaming companies or any of that is going to be hard, because all the big guys are adding that to their platform, so to speak. So for them, it's just an enticement. For Zoom, it's their business.
It'll be interesting to see, because their competition is companies with ad platforms, and Zoom has is going against them and playing in their home court. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. And then there is another aspect to it. So, which means competitors for Zoom who are privacy friendly will start to gain traction. Just like, you know, Chrome's privacy abuse gave rise to Brave. I expect several companies like that to come up who are privacy conscious. I was going through, Zoom's privacy policy, the updates that they have made, and they said, they could share the personal information with marketing, advertising, and analytics partners. It's vague enough, and we know what that means. And there are several other things, which means the information that they collect through these things will be shared, and
Hmm.
and that's a slippery slope. This is the 1.0 version of this privacy policy with these changes, but history shows that it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, and they have to collect as much data as they can to serve relevant ads. So I mean, at least with other platforms like Microsoft or Google or whatever, they have other use cases where they're collecting information. But here, if your only use case is these conversations, then it's only a matter of time until it starts getting mined to be able to serve better ads, right? Pretty basic from there. We can switch gears to the next article. I think the title is a little bit more clickbaity than it actually was. It was a result of some of the, I guess, Facebook papers that came out in terms of how they're targeting children and all these kind of things. And so I think Ars Technica article is basically, as teens left Facebook, companies plan to lure 6-year-olds. Documents show. Usually, Ars Technica, I feel like, is a little bit better than this because the meat of this article was like slim. I mean, they create Messenger for Kids, and Messenger for Kids is obviously meant for kids under 13. Um, and basically, there was like some job posting that said, like, creating a messaging platform for ages 6 to 12. And somehow the article headline became Lure 6-year-olds. And I'm not really sure that's, I mean, technically it's true, but it's not like there just wasn't a lot of meat to it. And I feel like this one got a lot more play than even the facial recognition story for Facebook this week. And I think it's just because the age thing will trigger people a lot more. But yeah, I don't know if you guys saw anything more to it or actually saw any kind of depth to the story. But
I
did I
didn't.
disappear?
I mean,
No, you're there.
I think
You're there.
I think the challenge, with Facebook again, they have to keep growing. So which means they have to attract these smaller companies out there or smaller age groups out there, demographics and developing countries and whatnot. They have been trying these for various ways. And in fact, going back to the initial story about face recognition and whatnot, there we'll have to see how much depth there is to it, and we'll likely see more of that story revealed in coming days. Remember, I also think there was a story this week about some leak about a watch with a camera or something like that.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
Yep.
newest
yeah.
addition to the
So it
metaverse.
means my guess is the facial recognition in its 2D form may not be interesting for Facebook, but in its the depth form with more data will be more interesting. And I think I also saw another article that talked about why Facebook, the product now, is not interested in facial recognition, but Meta is still interested in it because that's more data.
Hmm.
And even Facebook's post, they were talking about why it makes sense for in-device computing, on-device computing, like Apple does with Face ID. So I think Facebook is going for more data, not less, and they're using
Yeah.
just this PR thing for now. Yeah, typical Facebook, PR thing where again, no trust.
You got to wonder, the whole metaverse thing. One one component, at least from my perspective, is now that privacy is really heating up in the real world. Uh, it almost feels like going to the metaverse allows them to think of ways to collect data and not and maybe feel like they don't have to because it's not the real world, it's this digital world, that maybe the privacy laws that are, well, privacy activities that are beginning to crop up, in the actual world, maybe they don't have to worry about in this digital world that they're looking to create. And that provides them with an opportunity to do even more data collecting without, some of the hangups or some of the legislation that they may be facing, which is kind of interesting. Because it feels like they have completely gone all in on this digital world, the metaverse, and the potential for collecting even more data, like Raj, you said, seems way almost sort of like the new gold rush, instead of the gold rush that's been going on with privacy in the real world. There, it feels like there's an opportunity that they're looking to get in on, to collect even more data, in this digital realm, so to speak.
Uh, Not good. Let's see. Deep dive story, I guess, for the week, and we've hinted about this before, but Newsweek did a pretty good article in terms of how your cars basically collect an insane amount of information about you. And
Yeah.
it went through a lot of detail and gave a lot of examples of how exactly it's happening. But obviously, I think we all know that cars are getting more and more digitally connected, and cars have a lot of telemetry information about where you're going, how fast you're driving, the type of things you're doing, but also with the more, I would say, integrated infotainment systems also get, you also have an idea of what type of destinations you're going to, when you're going to them, what kind of music you listen to, all these different pieces of information, and really just not regulated very well at all, because every car maker can just create whatever they want to. There was a crazy story in the very beginning of this article where I think the government had created a, I guess technically it's a wiretap, I think, on this car, and they basically used Sirius XM that was built into the car to track this car's location for 10 days, and or it was a search warrant, not, sorry, not a wiretap. And so we talked about in the past about how like Google was offering these like keyword search warrants basically, and now you have these like car search warrants that are tracking your location for 10 days based off of some software or technology that's baked into the car that you have no control over. Doesn't seem like a very good situation, but there's been a big rise of, I think, car data in general. A lot of these insurance companies have been popping up with added discounts. Every company I think has their own version of naming it, but you basically stick like some little tracker thing in your ODB or OBD, diagnostic port in your car, and that thing will have like a cellular connection, and it'll track exactly how fast you accelerate, how fast you brake, how you're driving, if there's any sudden movements, and allegedly it'll calculate insurance rates based on that. And so they call it like a safe driving discount or something along those lines. And it's really just used to track everything about you. And right now, I think most of the time they'll say that we won't charge you more for bad driving, but you can potentially get a discount. So most people think, oh, there's no harm in putting it in there if I can't get charged more for driving like a lunatic, but I can possibly, get a lowered rate. That's okay. But what you don't realize is that even if you don't get a discount, you're still giving them free data that they're then using for other purposes. So it's a it's a lose lose. Um, did you guys see anything else? I'm sure you've probably heard a decent amount about these car trackings and things along those lines, and what manufacturers are kind of up to.
Yeah, I think there's a one on one side there's a transition towards EVs, right? And increasingly EVs are software centric, and majority of the car companies, the way I would say it is they are auto manufacturers that are adding software, but most of EV companies, Tesla in particular, are software companies getting into auto. It's the other way around. So, which means no matter which direction you take, software plays a critical role. And even in that case, privacy will be a core differentiator. And initially, I think we are still in the very initial stages. There may not be laws and regulations that protect it, but increasingly I see those coming. You may have seen China restricting Tesla regarding the data that they collect, and they say it should not leave the country. That is just the initial phase we are in, and there'll likely be additional such regulations that will come into play, and it's just a matter of time. So so we are still in the early stages. The abuse has been brutal. I mean, today they are collecting as much information as possible without users even being aware of it, without user education. It's just like Wild West at this point, where just like we are seeing in the biometric data collection, we are seeing the same thing on the car data collection. When you combine that with your phone data and whatnot, it's just gonna get worse. So people are unaware of it. I think that's the problem. People are not being informed on what is being collected and how it is being used.
I actually have an app from my insurance company. And I don't know if you can see it or not, but I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's tracking looking at this, like the date, the where you've gone, where you're coming from, where you're going to, the duration, the number, the distance in terms of miles, and then they can even get into, and this is an insurance company, so they're talking about you're if you're braking too hard, if you're distracted by way of you're on the phone, uh, all these different things, and so just in a short like 10-minute trip, they're collecting all sorts of data about you and your, where you're going, maybe your behaviors, how you drive, all the, and they can probably tell you who you're talking to. So, like you said, it's just so much data that and of course, it's all being sold because even if you want it, I'm sure there are some pieces of data that aren't as important to you, but other people are willing to pay for it. And yeah, it's like, and that's just an app. There's not anything that, any piece of hardware on your in your car that's tracking this stuff. This is just your phone. You have it turned on, and you have giving the people that opting into putting that data over to them, allowing them to have access to it. And I don't think, like you said, I don't think when people say, "Oh yeah, I'm opting in," I'm okay with them, tracking me just to see if I can get a discount. It's like opening the door for all sorts of ways and all sorts of information that they could get from you that you never even dreamed of when you opted in, thinking, "Oh, this is going to get me a nice little discount."
Yeah, I remember.
The two things,
Sorry.
right?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
One, collecting data that benefits the end user versus collecting the data that benefits the company. Today, the first one is not taken into consideration, or there is minimal benefit that is passed on to the user for collecting the data. And the first one is okay if it benefits the user, and if it helps me in some way, and I can live with that. But the real issue here is the second one. They are collecting the data to find additional revenue streams after they sold me the car. So again, the same double dipping concept. They made money when they sell the car, and then they're using the data that they're collecting and also monetizing that, selling it to the insurance companies and whatnot. Actually, I think the insurance industry as an independent entity should die, and that actually the car provider themselves should be getting into the insurance model. That is insane. And interestingly, the insurance companies make more money than the auto companies themselves. So the entire thing will be reset in the next decade or so. It's just a matter of time. That has to happen. But in the interim, and I think that will eventually happen. I'm glad Tesla is getting into the insurance, because if the car can protect you, well, you tie that with the insurance. So, and it has to be a metric that benefits the end user. And because there is an independent entity called insurance company, and then they are trying to make additional revenue by selling this data to that independent insurance company, all of these additional data sharing and data abuse pop up. I think that itself should be eliminated in the long run.
Good to see you,
Yeah, I
Tejas.
mean, yeah. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. It's these red name labels. It's changed everything. Yeah, I mean, like what Roger said about like there is, I guess, a potential good upside, right? I mean, why give this information to the insurance agency when the car manufacturer can track exactly who got hit, how you were driving, and like you have the data associated with it, right? I think a big good thing is probably the rise of dash cams in general for cars to protect themselves and have that all integrated in. Arguably, you could probably make a privacy case for why dash cams are probably maybe not ideal or whatever, because you don't really know when you're being filmed. But at the end of the day, I think when it comes to safety and things like that, these types of things are important. And I think auto insurance is kind of a very outdated model, and they're trying to catch up by just kind of collecting what they can. But um, I don't see it going very well for these fellas.
I like what you just said. Collecting what they can. It's almost like some of these data models are figured out in real time because they're saying, well, we just want to collect data. We don't know exactly what. Just give us all the data we can get, and then we'll
Hmm.
figure out the data model or the business model after the fact. As long as we have
Yeah.
access to the data, we'll figure it out. So just opt in. We'll give you a little
In the
discount.
entire
Opt in.
sentence,
Give us all your data.
you said, Brent, if you can repeat the same thing by replacing data with money, that
Mm.
tells it all. We'll collect all the money we can. Just give us the money. We'll worry about the business model later. Just give us the money for now.
We'll figure out.
Yeah, just give it to us. We'll get back to you.
All right, I think we're coming up close on time. Did want to end on a relatively good note, I guess. One little thing I found, I want to say it might have been on Reddit, it might have been somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where I got it from, but whoever's page it is, they'll get credit for it. But there is this thing called the big ass data broker opt out list, and this fella took a lot of time into creating. Basically, you can go to this link on the screen, zoho.to/opt out list, and it'll reroute you to like this person's GitHub page that basically walks through how to opt out of a lot of these popular data brokers. And so it'll have step by step instructions, take you directly to the link of the form you need to fill out or where you need to send an email to get your information removed from a lot of places. I think they spent an insane amount of time updating this and curating the information and making it as detailed as possible. So if there is like your tip of the week or good news or whatever, take some time. And go through this website, at least try to knock out one a day, a couple a day if you can, and clean up your basically your digital footprint that you didn't really ask for it to be tracked and organized.
I just love the name of it. The big ass data broker opt out.
I mean, I'm hoping
Genius.
that's his name and not our name.
I'm okay with it. No, I
I'm-
found this too, and it was I looked at this thing, and it is like you said. They spent a lot of time. They broke it down into different kind of categories of opt out kind of opportunities. Even
Mhm.
talk about it in terms of some are free, some are paid, some you're gonna have to like go back in time, use a fax machine to get your stuff out. I mean, it's really impressive what they did and the commitment to time to put this all together. And it seems to be, something they will continue to update too.
All right. Well, let's call it a day here, and we'll link up next week. And yeah, have a good weekend. And hopefully, we don't have stuff to talk about next week, but I feel like we will. And so we'll
We'll be
keep doing the
back.
show. All right. Adios, fellas. See y'all next week.
Thank you.